Hi, everybody.
Hello.
You don't have kids, do you, Di?
I have 6 of them.
I'm kidding. I could see the diapers. That's awesome.
I'll just stock up for COVID and in case I have more kids. Now those are they're empty. We put old clothes in there, like from 12 months, and then like 1 or 2 year old, and so on and so forth. In case we have more kids, we can just pass on their clothes.
That's a good idea.
Hello, everyone. Do we have everyone here? Okay. Should we wait a couple more minutes for, does John McCarthy need to be at the meeting?
He's here.
Oh, he is. Okay. And is Mitra here?
I don't think so.
Well, we'll give it another minute. And then, Catherine, you're ready to go? And everyone can hear me? Okay. Okay, well, let me see. I think I will begin. The September Library Board meeting is called to order. Roll call.
Board members Brenmoen.
Here.
Jalali. Tolbert.
Here.
Naker.
Here.
Tao.
Here.
Yang. Board member Yang.
Here.
Chair Prince.
Here.
6 present, 1 absent, being board member Jalali. Item number 1, 20-17, approving the minutes of the March, April, and July 2020 library board meetings.
I'm assuming we don't need any discussion on that. We have a motion by Ms. Naker to approve those minutes. All in favor? I guess that is a roll call vote.
Oh, sorry. Brenmoen.
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Chair Prince.
Aye.
6 in favor, none opposed. The minutes are approved. Item number 2, staff report 20-80 on the 2021 budget.
Thank you. And Ms. Pinkert, we'll turn the meeting over to you. we're all aware that, as was pointed out by the Friends of the Libraries, that libraries is taking an outsized hit compared to the rest of the budget this time. And so we're all deeply concerned about that, given the very important role that library has served in terms of our multicultural community, that the role that libraries have served with our CARES Act program as career labs, with making masks, with serving our community during COVID. So we will listen to your presentation, and thank you for all you're doing to keep the libraries vital during this difficult year.
Thank you for that, Chair Prince. And I just want to check in on technology. Can you all see my screen and hear me okay? Good. All right. So yes, my goal today is to walk you through the 2021 proposal for the library. And here. So I'm going to first by just kind of walking you through our thought process leading up to the proposed budget. And that really starts with our priorities. And so in building the budget, we prioritize the items that you see on this list. And when we think about the multiple crises of this year and the ways in which libraries are best positioned to meet immediate needs, we think of the following areas. We think about education and virtual learning support, digital and economic inclusion, social connection, and racial and social equity. And in preparing this budget, we were also concerned with maintaining social infrastructure for residents of St. Paul. And we know that social infrastructure are all of the pieces of a city that really form that social connective tissue that is so critical to a healthy, thriving community. And our 13 library locations, our bookmobile, and our online resources, of course, are, we think, an essential component of social infrastructure here in St. Paul. And when we think about, what every location offers, it's things as simple as computers, internet, copiers, printers, technology. There's, of course, the books, the music, educational materials. There's the huge variety of learning programs that are designed to be accessible and inclusive of all ages, backgrounds, cultures, and abilities. There's opportunities to connect with social service providers. There's free community meeting spaces. And then, of course, our most valuable asset is our staff team, people who are trained and experienced in helping with community resource questions and needs. And so we really feel our 13 libraries and the bookmobile cover our city well, and we wanted to maintain that footprint through the pandemic. We see the library's collection as a direct public service that is also a priority always, and especially at this time. And then, of course, avoidance of layoffs. So we sought these were the priorities that informed our choices. This chart gives an overview of the library's general fund. And in 2021, the general fund proposal totals roughly $18.2 million. This brings the department back to a pre-2019 funding level. The reduction target the library was given was just over $1 million. And when you look for a reduction of over $1 million from this budget for a system of our size, it's pretty difficult to find anything to give. So the gray slice on this pie, this is a variety of central service fees. We will talk a little bit more about what those are later, but this slice is largely predetermined and based on the number of FTE we have, and is not a piece that we look at or that is available when we're thinking about meeting a general fund reduction target. The yellow slice on this image funds the library's collections and materials purchases, technology hardware, and some additional supplies for basic library operations. Things like paper for copy machines, toner for public printers, and so on. The entirety of the library's general fund collections budget is just over $1 million, roughly the size of the reduction target. And so you can see how a reduction target of $1 million theoretically could wipe out the collections budget entirely. Similarly, the orange slice covers all building maintenance needs, repairs, technology contracts, and things of that nature. when we are running a system with a set number of locations, there are some relatively fixed costs to maintaining buildings and to maintaining the technological infrastructure that's needed to run a library. Our past history of budget to actuals shows that we may actually be a bit under budgeted in this area, that often just by kind of fixing the things that break, we overspend according to our budget. And so this did not feel like an area that could be further trimmed. And as you can see, when looking for to find over $1 million, this could also just wipe out that orange slice completely. And so without closing a facility, which is not something we wanted to do in the next year, we didn't really see how we could take more from that orange slice. Sometimes when people think about the library, they think about the public programs, think about homework centers, summer spark, and those kinds of things. Those are generally funded with special funds. And so any reduction in programs, eliminating any of those programs, really doesn't help us achieve a general fund reduction target. And so that really leaves us with the largest piece of this pie, which is employee expenses. Last year, if you looked, or the current year, I guess, if you look at the 2020 pie chart, 74% of the library's general fund was for employee wages and benefits. And in 2021, that percentage drops to 73%, which reflects the smaller workforce that is proposed for 2021. To put the 2021 proposal into context, I wanted to just bring in a couple of pieces of historical info. The first picture is this 5-year look back, and it shows that things have really been tight for the library budget. Since 2015, the number of open hours has stayed the same, the number of FTEs has stayed roughly the same, and the work done by this department has really grown. Think about things like piloting community ambassadors at libraries, the trauma-sensitive library project, including adding the social worker, going fine-free, record participation numbers for Summer Spark, expanding Read Brave, expanding community services work with immigrant and refugee communities, and so on and so on. In this department, we have been pushing very hard to squeeze every bit of public service possible out of our funding allocation. And general fund growth has been a bit slower than the city overall. And then I brought in this picture of last year's budget, or the current year, 2020, just to give a picture of the types of changes that we had already made to trim spending and try to reallocate funding for new initiatives. And so this shows the level of cost cutting we did last year to enable investment in some strategic priorities. So Read Brave and the library social worker were both new or expanded bodies of work that were largely done without new funding. Instead, they were funded through reallocations of existing resources. We trimmed our supply and maintenance budgets. We cut some technology products. We ended memberships to several professional associations, and we even sold a car that provided mobile service. Because we took those cuts for 2020, it meant that in a time of crisis, there was really very little left to look at for a cut without looking at FTE. And so with that context in mind, here's an overview of the 2021 proposal. Today, per Holly's instructions, I'm going to focus primarily on the reductions piece. And then in October, I will go into further details on the investments that we felt were important to enable us to keep responding to community needs and to continue moving forward on our priorities, specifically around racial equity and digital inclusion. So the total net impact to the library's discretionary budget is $1.1 million, and then the central service fee reduction brings it to $1.3 million. On the next slide, I'm going to go into much more detail about the workforce piece of this. So I will move down to the next couple line items, and then we'll come back to the FTE. So on the collections reduction, so last year at this time I was here and I was presenting to you about the state of the library's collections funding and how we really remained at a pretty low level for a city of our size and a library system of our size. And that our collections budget was dependent on a number of one-time investments that had been made year after year rather than sustainable and predictable funding. And I also shared information that showed that the increasing demand for digital materials, for ebooks and e-audiobooks, puts significant pressure on our collections funding because the e-formats are much more expensive than print. You heard me, you took in that information. Thank you for that. And last year, Council added $200,000 to the library's budget using parking fund resources to support collections. And the plan put in place at that time was for parking fund resources to go down each year by $50,000 and be backfilled by $50,000 from the general fund. And that would slowly build up the general fund base for collections funding over time. The 2021 proposal includes $150,000 of parking fund resources as planned. The $17,000 reduction shown here comes off the base general fund contribution. While we did not feel we could entirely avoid a collections reduction as part of meeting the overall 2021 target, we did seek to minimize the amount we were taking from collection. In part, that was because, as I had said, we already, the data shows and, we experienced this is already a tight area of our budget in trying to serve a city of our size and our diversity in every kind of meaning of the word diversity, that we are already stretched to do that well. And then in addition to that, in this moment in history, this time of significant collective learning in our society, the availability of a diverse, relevant, accessible collection of information and stories is vital. And additionally, we are seeing that demand for the digital resources, which again are more expensive, is surging in the pandemic environment. And as more and more people seek to access library materials via their iPad or their phone or whatever their device is, rather than come into a building. So we really seek to continue meeting this public purpose of the library system as much as possible through this very difficult time, and therefore wanted to minimize the reduction from this area of our service.
Yep. Ms. Pinkert, is there something going on with the materials fund in terms of COVID changing the service delivery model that makes cutting the $17,000 at this point from the general fund? I'm concerned about that cut in the general fund at this point, and I'm just wondering if it should come from a different.
I would love to have finance note that question and have us come back in October and speak in more detail about the strategy around collections, both the data and the adaptations of what we're seeing in usage during COVID, and then also they can offer more detail about why the $17,000 was taken from the general fund allocation versus other sources. I don't have that at this time. Will that work to note that one down and come back to it?
Yes, thank you for that. And we have a question from Ms. Naker.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair Prince. And this is sort of to follow up on your question. I'm curious as to why that $17,000 is ongoing as opposed to one time. I mean, I know all of us hope that the pain that we're going to be experiencing in this coming year's budget is going to be somewhat temporary. And I know I would like to see us get back to the point where the general fund continues to assume responsibility for collections, not at a reduced level. So is there a reason why that's not just a one-time reduction?
So anything we took from as a general fund reduction, we noted as ongoing. Nothing is ever permanent, and so it could come back, but there's no automatic bounce back built in. And so if right now what this does is it takes our general fund base down, and so the 2022 base will be written at this lower level. There's nothing to say we couldn't bump it back up at this time, but this is really about the base coming out of this, and the base will be 17,000 lower. John and Susan, I don't know if you're able to chime in if there's any more you want to say on this.
Board Chair Prince and board members, this is Susan Earle. Can you all hear me? Great. I think I would just say I don't know that there's much more I would add. I think Director Pinker did a good job of explaining, right, when we take things out of the general fund, the reductions that were proposed and then accepted by the mayor, in most cases were considered ongoing. And then, as I think I mentioned in my city overview, a lot of the there'll be a reevaluation, right, of a lot of things as we kind of pull out of this pandemic. But at this point, there's nothing that's guaranteed to be sort of automatically blinked back on into the 2022 budget.
Thank you, Ms. Earl. Are there further questions on this issue right now? Ms. Pankert, you can continue with the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Chair Prince. So the central service fees. So this is one of the ones where the library is situated a little differently. So technically by charter, since libraries is a separate agency, this department is required to pay central service fees. And these are fees that get paid to the general fund to account for the use of internal services such as OTC, HR, OFS. And so what you see here is a reduction in those fees that is aligned with the reduction in FTE, that those fees go up and down based on the number of FTE assigned to the department. There are a couple of other fee reductions in the 2021 proposal. There's a property insurance reduction, a technology and innovation fund contribution that decreased because fund balance is used in part to cover some of the costs. These fees do not impact the library's discretionary budget, the money that's actually available to us to spend on public service. And as I said, I will delve into the investments line on this much more deeply in October. But for now, I just want to note that even during this time of retraction, we remain very committed to our goals, and that includes goals for advancing racial equity in our workforce and in our community. And these investments, we think, will enable us to continue making progress in some meaningful ways. Trying to get my computer to switch. Here we go. So now I'm going to go into greater detail on the most significant area of the proposed reduction, which is in the library's workforce allocation. In 2020, so the current year, the library is budgeted for roughly 177 FTE. In 2021, that drops to 162. Currently, as of September 2nd, 2020, we have more than 20 FTE that are vacant in the library. In a workforce like ours, our departments, where we depend on some number of part-time positions, people work 0.1, 0.2, 0.8. It's important to remember that FTE is full-time equivalents, but it translates to a higher number of individual positions. And so when I say we have 20 FTE vacant, it actually means more than 20 individual positions that had previously been filled prior to COVID and currently are not. And those the savings from those vacancies are part of our overall 2020 savings plan for the library and for the city. In order to meet the 2021 reduction target that was over $1 million, many of the currently vacant positions are eliminated from the library's base in 2021. These positions they represent the three major bargaining units for our workforce. They are positions at frontline, mid-level manager, and supervisor levels. And this would bring the library's total budgeted workforce to its lowest level since at least 2005. And I only say 2005 because that's the farthest back that I had data that I felt confident in saying I'm comparing apples to apples, but it's likely even longer than that. The 2004-2005 time period is also an important marker because that is the time when Dayton's Bluff Library opened. That was the last time a branch was added to the system. And so since that time, we've been operating with the same number of locations. And so the 2021 budget proposal represents the smallest library workforce that has been proposed with the number of locations that we currently have. Saving all 20 of the 20 plus vacancies that we currently have would actually exceed what was needed to meet the 2021 reduction target we were given. And so therefore, we would be able to be in a position of starting to build back, even in some very small ways, by doing a bit of hiring in 2021. And you see that the number there says 4+, and that just indicates the number of vacancies. We plan to be in a hiring freeze through the end of the calendar year, so the number of vacancies could continue to grow if we see more positions open up, and so that number could change. The cultural liaison and program coordinator positions you see here are included in the proposed 2021 base. And again, I'm going to come back to those positions in the October presentation and talk about them as investments. For today, I just want to say the cultural liaisons are not new roles, but what you see here represents a move from special fund grant funds to a sustainable allocation in the general fund base. And any elimination of positions beyond what's in the 2021 proposal is going to further harm our ability to provide public services for St. Paul residents. So now I will talk about the service impacts of this proposal. So Mayor Carter said that the 2021 proposed budget would include significant pain points for our community. And one of those pain points would be library service hours. Our community should expect a noticeable reduction in the number of open hours at libraries citywide. And I continue to use this line that even if a COVID vaccine is available on January 1st of 2021 and the pandemic is gone and we don't have to be concerned with that anymore, the library just would not have the workforce needed to open at pre-COVID levels of service. And while we can't yet say exactly what this would look like in practice, there's just so much in flux around COVID and public health and distance learning and so many factors that influence this. I am going to give a couple of examples on the next slide of what types of changes are likely under a reduced service schedule. Before I go to those, I just want to mention, in addition to open hours, the library would have a reduced capacity in a couple of operational areas. Due to the elimination of the library facilities manager position, we would have reduced capacity to adequately fulfill the work of planning and directing the maintenance, operation, construction, and improvement of library facilities. And due to the elimination of a public information specialist role, we would have reduced capacity to effectively and proactively communicate information and resources to the public. One of the main takeaways from this presentation is that libraries would not be open at pre-COVID levels of service anytime in 2021 under this budget. And the future ability to restore hours would really depend on restoring FTE to the library's workforce. Pre-COVID, we were open 712 hours a week across 13 locations. That included 7-day-per-week service at many locations and hours on many days at many places that were roughly 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. The 2021 proposal is an 8.7% reduction in the library's workforce. And so right now, as I said, it is impossible to predict exactly what post-pandemic service and staffing needs could look like. If you just take 8.7% reduction in workforce and apply that to open hours, it would leave at most 650 weekly open hours as kind of the max potential service level without additional FTE. Again, this is just a projection. This is a way of getting at an estimate, but it's not a hard number at this time.
Ms. Pinker, I believe Ms. Naker, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Chair Prince. Ms. Pinkert, I'm just wondering, I know you said you don't know where exactly those service impacts will be and how they'll fall out right now. But can you tell us, do you anticipate that the cuts will be felt equally across all libraries in the system? The reduction in hours would be the same across all branches and all neighborhoods? Or if not, how do you have a sense as to how you plan to make those decisions about where greater cuts happen?
It's a great question. I expect them to be at every location. Every location would feel something. Whether it's the exact same number of hours everywhere, I don't know that. Right now, we kind of divide our libraries into sort of, for lack of better language, small, medium, and large. And that is both actual physical size, but also often the service schedule. And so even pre-pandemic, some didn't have as expansive weekend hours as others, for example. So I would anticipate probably some variation. Equity in service is going to be a really strong driving factor here. Even now, as we've kind of phased in modified services, really looking at what type of service and where in the city is that service and how does it line up with the needs of a particular neighborhood. We have really done our best to be really attentive to that. So I can't say today, and the last factor I would offer is that our buildings are in a variety of conditions, and some are in better condition than others, and some have better, some are more well-suited to sort of a pandemic retrofit than others. And so there may be some actual facility questions too that, that influence those decisions. The pre-pandemic, pre-COVID staffing level or model was really focused on spreading out kind of a minimal number of staff across as broad a set of hours as we could. In a pandemic COVID-19 world, in some ways we actually need more staff per open hour. We need a greeter at the door to give people a safety orientation. We need more people doing wipe downs and cleaning. And so depending what sticks from kind of these pandemic safety practices, it could also be that in the future open hours require more staff intensive service models than existed before. And so that would also impact the total number of hours that we could be open with any given allocation of FTE. And so, as I said, I can't predict exactly, I don't have it written today, what the service schedule would look like. Here are examples we see when we look to the past. And past times of budget challenges, we see locations opening later. They don't open until noon on some days, or they close earlier. Rather than being open until 8, they might close at 7 or either at 5 p.m. Rather than being open every evening, they might be open 2 evenings a week. Rather than being open 10 or 11 a.m. until 4 or 5 on a Saturday, it might be more like 1 to 5. Many or all locations closed on Sundays. These were the types of adjustments that were made in the past to, again, keep some level of hours at every location, but reduce the level of service at each. And so these would be types of things I think we could imagine.
Ms. Paper, we have a question from Ms. Brenmo.
Hi there. Thanks for laying that out. I'm curious, just given that we've had our libraries open throughout much of COVID with contactless pickup and other sort of modified plans, is that one of the options you're looking at where we could have smaller staffing levels and reduce services at a library but not have it fully closed?
Board Chair Prince, Board Member Brenmo, yes, absolutely. I think what you're seeing now with Library Express, and as we roll out Library Express, and if you look at the service schedule for Library Express, that is similar to what I think you could expect. And so again, the Library Express hours, we've tried to make some Saturdays available or some weekends available. We've tried to look by geography and spread things out. And in total, it is a pretty significant reduction from the level of open hours we had before COVID hit. I think the Library Express service schedule is probably a good one to watch. With contactless, I will say it's interesting how, again, providing service during a pandemic is in some ways on the staff side more intensive because you are scheduling these individual pickup times, you're bundling individual orders, and there are all kinds of ways that type of thing plays out where actually the service model is so much more hands-on. And so it doesn't necessarily take fewer people to deliver a service like contactless. But our goal would be to have some type of activation at all 13 locations, because we know that each one of those locations fills many unique and important needs to the neighborhoods that it serves. And as our facilities plan showed when we presented that earlier this year, which feels like a million years ago, we have a well-distributed system of libraries with no obvious overlaps, no obvious redundancies in service areas. And so we want to try to keep all 13 activated to some extent. In the past, I just put this little data point here. Of course, when you have a lower number of open hours, you see lower numbers of annual visits. But interestingly, there was also a lower number of the average visitors per hour. And while I don't know if we can expect to see similar trends in the future, we do know that fewer open hours means less access to the services and resources available through libraries. And this picture is just an attempt to visualize how the proposed 2021 service level compares to the past. And so again, the 2021 number here shown here is just a projection. It represents an 8.7% reduction in hours based on an 8.7% reduction in FTE. But this lets you look back and see how hours have dropped in the past due to budget challenges from the last recession, from LGA cuts. You can see that pre-COVID, some service hours had been restored and FTE had been added back to support that. And libraries were still operating below the pre-2008-2009 recession levels. And so in this projection, the maximum possible open hours with the proposed number of FTE would still be lower than the lowest points of the past recession and LGA cuts. Just a quick note on special funds. Given the economic uncertainty and recession, there are risks to all of the library's special fund funding sources as well. These are a much smaller percentage of our total budget, but they are critical and we really depend on them to deliver the community learning programs like Summer Spark, Read Brave, legacy funded arts and cultural programs like Virtual Juneteenth partnership that we were part of. And so decreased funding in these other funding sources may translate to decreases in community learning programs as well, but we don't know yet. So finally, in closing, we were asked in the preparation materials to address our most significant budget concern for the department and how the department will begin recovery from these unexpected budget challenges. And the question I have on the screen here is one that we won't answer in this budget season, but it is the question for a year from now and the years beyond. This, in my mind, will be the question for libraries in St. Paul. I really do feel so grateful that as a city, we are not in a position of layoffs. And in order to accomplish that goal citywide, a significant number of positions that are currently vacant from the library's workforce are proposed for elimination. Dialing back the total size of the library's workforce means a reduction in public service, particularly in open hours. It does mean less access to all of the social infrastructure and the resources available through libraries. On days when I'm feeling hopeful, I can imagine a future where this becomes a transformation opportunity. It becomes an inflection point, and we rebuild a community workforce through libraries. And I can see a hopeful, exciting even vision there. However, there are no guarantees. There's nothing automatic here about a recovery for our library system. And so this department can take this level of reduction for 2021 without laying off any staff who are currently working. That's an important goal for the city overall. And in the future, there will be decisions to make about the role libraries play in delivering on priorities for the future of the city, and how we are able to resource that to really keep moving towards this vision that I know we all believe in, which is a city that truly works for all. And that's the conclusion of my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Pinkert. Do we have any other questions? Ms. Brenmoen, your hand is still raised. Did you have any questions? I will say one ray of hope in this budget is that it's good to see that we're permanently funding the cultural liaisons. So I am happy to see that recognition of the importance of that program, and the recognition that that's what our libraries have become, is resource centers for our really diverse multicultural communities. I sent everybody Beth Burns' letter. She had sent it to us in mid-July before the mayor had presented his budget. So I have sent that out to everyone so you can take another look at that. I know that the Friends share the question that Ms. Pinkert put up at the end of the presentation. Is this the new normal, or can we make a commitment to building back a general fund that will be able to be at the levels that our libraries really need to be at to achieve the excellence that we have achieved in recent years and historically. So there's a great deal of concern about when we come out the other end of the COVID crisis and the economic hardship that we're going through, can we make a commitment to restore those gains in our system? So I think that's something for all of us on the library board to wrestle with. I know that that everyone on this board is incredibly proud of the work of our libraries and feel this big cut as it's as difficult for all of us, I'm sure, as it is for our library staff. Ms. Pinkert, I'm so glad that you are leading our library because you have a track record of innovation and creativity and being able to kind of look at a sow's ear and turn it into something wonderful. But we're all going to have to really work together hard to build back. So with that, are there any other questions or comments about the budget? Hearing none, I think that we can adjourn unless there are any other issues that need to be discussed before we go. Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Ms. Pinkert.
Thank you. Thank you.
St. Paul get through this moment as well.
Pay It Forward is just a way to connect business owners with the resources they need. The beautiful thing about it, though, is the partnership with SCORE helps us to create an infrastructure where, on a longer-term basis,